Cold hearts, warm introductions. The 53rd floor of Westfield Tower gleamed with steel and glass, a kingdom of modern minimalism reflecting its owner's personality. Dominic Westfield stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped, behind his back, watching the city below like a dispassionate god. At 36, he had conquered the tech industry with ruthless efficiency, building Westfield Innovations into a global empire. "Mr. Westfield, your new executive assistant has arrived," announced Tessa, his HR director. He didn't turn immediately. "Number 5 this quarter, isn't it? Let's see how long this one lasts." "She comes highly recommended from—" "Spare me the details," he interrupted. "Send her in." When the door opened again, Dominic finally turned, expecting another polished corporate climber eager to network her way up the ladder. Instead, he found himself momentarily speechless. Prisha Sharma clutched her portfolio tight against her chest, her dark eyes wide but determined. She wore a simple burgundy dress that spoke of modest taste rather than designer ambition. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her minimal makeup highlighted natural beauty rather than corporate artifice. "Good morning, Mr. Westfield. I'm Prisha Sharma, your new executive assistant," she said, her voice carrying a gentle lilt that suggested she hadn't been born in the city. Dominic raised an eyebrow. "You're not what I expected." "I hope that's not disappointing," she replied, a slight smile touching her lips. "That depends entirely on your competence, Ms. Sharma." He gestured to the desk outside his office. "You'll find the previous assistant left rather abruptly. I expect you to organize the chaos by end of day." Prisha nodded, her expression resolute. "I understand completely." As the day progressed, Dominic found himself watching her through the glass partition. Unlike her predecessors, she didn't waste time networking or taking excessive coffee breaks. She simply worked, methodically sorting through the disorganized files, rescheduling meetings, and answering calls with quiet efficiency. By evening, when most employees had left, Prisha remained, still organizing the digital calendar system. Dominic emerged from his office, coat in hand. "It's past 8, Ms. Sharma." She looked up, startled. "Oh, I didn't realize. I wanted to finish the calendar integration before tomorrow." "Is that necessary tonight?" "You have the Singapore conference. Call at 5 a.m. I wanted to make sure everything was properly prepared." She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I know how important the Asian expansion is." Dominic frowned. "How did you know about the expansion plans?" "I read all the briefing materials for the next 3 months," she said simply. "I thought it would help me anticipate your needs better." For the first time in years, Dominic felt something unexpected, genuine surprise. "Have you eaten dinner?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "No, but I brought some food from home. I'll eat when I finish. What did you bring?" "Just some homemade rajma chawal, kidney bean curry with rice," she replied. "My mother's recipe." Dominic found himself curious. "Is your family in the city?" Prisha shook her head. "No, they're in a small town near Jaipur, India. I came to America for college and stayed." "Ambitious." "Necessary," she corrected gently. "My father passed away when I was young. My mother needed support for my younger brother's education. The personal revelation should have annoyed him. Dominic detested emotional entanglements in the workplace, but instead, he found himself nodding. "The Singapore team is notorious for trying to renegotiate terms during calls. Make sure you've highlighted all previously agreed points." "Already done," she said, turning her screen to show him a meticulously organized document with color-coded sections. "And I've prepared counter-arguments for the 3 most likely points of contention." Dominic stared at her work, then at her. In the soft evening light, something about her quiet confidence struck him differently than the aggressive ambition he was accustomed to. "Impressive, Ms. Sharma." "Thank you, Mr. Westfield." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, as He rode the private elevator down to the parking garage. Dominic realized his perpetual scowl had softened. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something besides cold calculation, a warmth as unfamiliar as it was unwelcome. Prisha. Sharma would be trouble, he decided, but perhaps not in the way he initially thought. Melting barriers, 3 months passed in a blur of meetings, international calls, and late nights at Westfield Tower. Prisha had not only survived, but thrived, becoming indispensable to Dominic in ways that surprised them both. The office whispered about her unprecedented tenure. No assistant had lasted this long with the notoriously demanding CEO. "The Tokyo investors are impressed with the presentation you helped prepare," Dominic said one evening as they reviewed quarterly projections in his office. Their questions were anticipated and addressed before they could even ask them. Prisha smiled, the warm glow of the desk lamp highlighting her features. "That's because we worked through every possible scenario together. Remember that night we ordered Thai food and stayed until midnight?" Dominic nodded, recalling how she'd kicked off her heels and sat cross-legged on his office couch, brainstorming counterpoints while sharing spicy noodles. He'd found himself telling her about his childhood in Boston, raised by a single mother, who worked 3 jobs. It was information not even his board members knew. "You have the Singapore contracts?" he asked, bringing himself back to the present. "Already reviewed and annotated," she replied, passing him a tablet. "I highlighted the problematic clauses in Section 4. Their fingers brushed as he took the device, a brief contact that sent an unexpected current through him. Dominic noticed how Prisha's cheeks colored slightly as she quickly withdrew her hand. "You should go home, Miss Sharma. It's late." "So should you, Mr. Westfield," she countered gently. "You haven't left before midnight all week." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you monitoring my hours now?" "Someone should," she replied with unexpected boldness. "Even tech moguls need sleep." The comment from anyone else would have earned a cutting rebuke, but from Prisha, Dominic found it oddly touching. "I'll sleep when the Asian expansion is secured." "Then you'll find another reason not to rest," she said softly. "There's always another mountain to climb in your world." The observation struck too close to home. "And what would you suggest instead?" Prisha hesitated, then spoke with quiet conviction. "Balance. The view from the mountain means nothing if you're too exhausted to appreciate it." Dominic studied her, this woman who had somehow breached his carefully constructed walls. "You're not like anyone I've ever worked with, Prisha." It was the first time he'd used her first name. The shift hung in the air between them, changing something fundamental. "Is that good or bad?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't decided yet." The next week brought the annual Westfield Innovations Charity Gala, a high-profile event Dominic typically endured rather than enjoyed. This year, however, he found himself watching the entrance, waiting for his assistant to arrive. When Prisha finally appeared, Dominic nearly didn't recognize her. Gone was the practical business. Attire replaced by a flowing emerald silk sari with gold embroidery that caught the light as she moved. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and delicate gold earrings framed her face. "You look," he began when she approached, finding himself uncharacteristically at a loss for words. "Not like your assistant?" She finished with a small smile. "Not like anyone else in the room?" he corrected. "It suits you." As the evening progressed, Dominic found himself gravitating toward her throughout the event. They stood together during speeches, her analytical observations about board members making him chuckle under his breath. When the music started, he surprised both of them by extending his hand. "Would you dance with me?" Prisha's eyes widened. "Everyone will talk." "Let them," he replied, with a casualness he didn't quite feel. On the dance floor, her hand felt small but steady in his. The professional boundary between them had been gradually thinning for months, but now it seemed gossamer thin, ready to dissolve entirely. Why did you really take this job? He asked as they moved together. Someone with your talents could work anywhere with better hours and less demanding bosses. Prisha looked up at him, her dark eyes reflecting the soft lights above. I wanted to learn from the best. I didn't expect to... To what? He pressed when she didn't continue. To find the man behind the reputation, she admitted. Everyone talks about Dominic Westfield, the ruthless CEO. Few see the person who works himself to exhaustion because he believes in building something meaningful. Something shifted in his chest, a wall crumbling that he'd spent years reinforcing. And what does Prisha Sharma want to build? A life that matters, she said simply, where my work makes a difference and where I'm valued for who I am, not just what I can do. The music ended, but neither moved away immediately. For a moment, they stood suspended between their professional relationship and something deeper neither had acknowledged. Later that night, after most guests had departed, they found themselves alone in his office, retrieving documents for an early morning meeting. Rain lashed against the windows, the storm outside mirroring the turbulence within. You should take my driver, Dominic said, watching her gather her things. The weather's terrible. I'll be fine, she insisted. I can call a ride. Thunder cracked, overhead making her jump slightly. Dominic moved closer, concerned. Are you afraid of storms? Only the unexpected ones, she replied, looking up at him. The double meaning wasn't lost on him. They stood too close now. The professional distance evaporated entirely. His hand moved of its own accord, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Prisha, he began, his voice rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. This is probably a mistake, she whispered, but didn't move away. Probably, he agreed before lowering his mouth to hers. The kiss began tentatively, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, wrapping her arms around his neck, the last of his restraint shattered. Years of isolation and emotional detachment dissolved in the warmth of her embrace. That night, as rain continued to fall outside the tower, windows, they surrendered to feelings neither had planned for. In Prisha's gentle touch, Dominic found something he hadn't known he was missing. And in his arms, Prisha discovered the heart beneath the empire builder's cold exterior. Neither spoke of what tomorrow would bring, or how this would change everything. For once, the calculating businessman and the practical assistant allowed themselves to exist only in the moment, consequences deferred until morning's light. Shattered distance morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight streaming through the office windows where Dominic and Prisha had spent the night together. Reality crashed back as Prisha gathered her scattered clothing, avoiding Dominic's gaze. Prisha, he began, his voice unusually hesitant. About last night. We don't need to discuss it, she interrupted, her fingers trembling as she fastened her necklace. It was unprofessional of me. It won't happen again. Dominic frowned, caught off guard by her reaction. That's not what I was going to say. Please, Mr. Westfield, she said, reverting to formality like armor. We have the board meeting in 3 hours. I should go home and change. Before he could respond, his phone rang, the special tone reserved for emergencies. Dominic answered automatically, his eyes still on Prisha as she slipped into her shoes. What? He barked into the phone. His expression darkened. When? No, I'll handle it personally. Have the legal team ready in 30 minutes. He ended the call and ran a hand through his disheveled hair. The Singapore deal is falling apart. Their CEO is threatening to walk unless we renegotiate terms. I'll reschedule your morning appointments, Prisha said immediately, professional mask firmly in place. This isn't just about last night, Dominic said, catching her wrist as she turned to leave. We need to talk about what this means. What it means, she said quietly, gently extracting herself from his grip, is that I forgot myself. You're Dominic Westfield. I'm just your assistant. You've never been just anything to me. Pain flashed across her features. You should focus on saving your deal. That's what matters most to you. The words stung because they contained a truth he wasn't ready to confront. His empire had always come first. Relationships were collateral damage to ambition. Yet somehow, watching her walk away felt like losing something irreplaceable. We'll talk later, he called after her. Prisha nodded without turning back. Her shoulders rigid with tension as she closed the door behind her, but later never came. The Singapore crisis consumed the next 3 days, with Dominic locked in marathon negotiation sessions. Prisha performed her duties flawlessly, anticipating his needs and working tirelessly to support the effort, but the warmth between them had vanished. Each interaction was painfully professional, as if they were performing roles for an invisible audience. On the 4th day, Dominic emerged victorious from the final negotiation to find Harrison Blake, his vice president of operations, waiting outside the conference room. "Congratulations on saving the deal," Harrison said, falling into step beside him. "Though I must say, your assistant has been instrumental. The woman's a miracle worker." "Speaking of Prisha, where is she? I need to brief her on the final terms." Harrison gave him an odd look. "She didn't tell you? She submitted her resignation this morning, effective immediately." Dominic stopped dead in his tracks. "What?" "Said it was a family emergency. She's already cleared out her desk." The world tilted beneath Dominic's feet. Without another word to Harrison, he strode to his office, finding Prisha's desk immaculately organized but unmistakably vacant. Her personal items, the small elephant figurine her mother had given her, the framed photo of her brother's graduation, were gone. On his desk lay a sealed envelope with his name written in her elegant handwriting. Inside was a formal resignation, letter citing family obligations along with a smaller note, "Dominic, some distances can't be bridged. You have built an empire that needs you whole. I would only be a distraction from what truly matters in your life. Please don't try to contact me. This is better for both of us. Prisha." He crumpled the note in his fist, a cold fury building inside him. She had made the decision for both of them without giving him a chance to speak. He reached for his phone to call her, only to discover she had blocked his number. When he dispatched his driver to her apartment, he returned with news that she had already moved out. Prisha Sharma had vanished from his life as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. 6 weeks later, Prisha sat alone in her new apartment in Portland, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines stared back at her, confirming what her body had already been telling her. She was carrying Dominic Westfield's child. Her first instinct was to call him, but the financial news channel playing in the background stopped her cold. There on the screen was Dominic, looking devastatingly handsome in a tailored suit, standing beside Valentina Novak, the beautiful heiress to Novak Technologies. Merger between Westfield Innovations and Novak Technologies has industry insiders speculating about both business and personal connections between CEO Dominic Westfield and Valentina Novak, the reporter was saying. Sources close to both parties suggest an engagement announcement may follow the business merger. Prisha turned off the television, one hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. Of course, Dominic would align himself with someone like Valentina, sophisticated, wealthy, and from his world. The merger would cement his control over the Asian markets he'd been targeting for years. Their night together had meant nothing. She had been right to leave. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered to her unborn child. The following months passed in a blur as Prisha built a new life far from Westfield Tower. She found work as an operations manager at a small but growing tech startup where her expertise quickly made her valuable. Her pregnancy progressed without complications, though morning sickness and fatigue made the early months challenging. She told no one about the baby's father, allowing colleagues to assume she was divorced or separated. At night, alone in her apartment, she sometimes found herself checking news about Westfield innovations, unable to completely sever the connection to her past. The merger with Novak Technologies had indeed gone through, bringing Dominic even greater wealth and influence. Photos occasionally appeared of him with Valentina at industry events, her diamond jewelry glittering under camera flashes. They made a striking couple, tech royalty uniting dynasties. He's where he belongs, Prisha told herself, rubbing her growing belly as she felt the baby kick. And we're where we belong. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, doubts crept in. Did Dominic have a right to know about his child? Was she wrong to keep this secret? Each time she pushed the thoughts away, remembering how quickly he had returned to his empire building after their night together. A baby would only complicate his perfectly orchestrated life. In her 5th month, complications arose. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously during a routine checkup, and her doctor ordered immediate bed rest. Preeclampsia is serious, Miss Sharma, Dr. Winters warned. Without proper care, it threatens both you and the baby. You need support. Is there anyone you can call? Prisha thought of her mother and brothers in India, too far away to help. Her few friends in Portland had their own families and responsibilities. I'll be fine, she assured the doctor, though fear clutched at her heart. I can manage. But as she lay in her quiet apartment that night, one hand resting on her swollen belly, Prisha faced the truth she'd been avoiding. She was afraid. Not just of the pregnancy complications, but of raising this child alone, of never telling Dominic, of the lies that would compound over years. What should I do? She whispered to her unborn child. The baby kicked in response, a flutter of movement that brought tears to her eyes. Whatever happened, whatever mistakes she had made, this child deserved a chance to know both parents, even if one of them was Dominic Westfield, the man who had unknowingly claimed her heart before breaking it. Tomorrow, she decided she would finally contact him. Not for herself, but for their child. What she didn't know was that fate had other plans, ones that would bring Dominic back into her life before she could reach out to him in the most unexpected way possible. Fated reunion. The Portland Medical Center buzzed with activity as Prisha made her way slowly toward the obstetrics department for her weekly monitoring appointment. At 7 months pregnant, her condition had stabilized somewhat, but her doctor remained concerned about her blood pressure and the baby's development. She paused near the main lobby, a wave of dizziness washing over her. The spells had become more frequent lately, another worry to add to her growing list. Leaning against a pillar, she closed her eyes and took deep breaths, counting slowly as her doctor had taught her. Ms. Sharma? Are you all right? A nurse approached, noticing her distress. Just need a moment, Prisha managed, but the room had begun to spin more violently. The last thing she remembered was the nurse calling for help as the floor seemed to rise up to meet her. Across the country, Dominic Westfield sat in yet another boardroom, surrounded by executives discussing the finalization of the Novak Technologies merger. For months, he had thrown himself into work with even greater intensity than before, using 18-hour days to drown out thoughts of Prisha. The strategy had failed miserably. She haunted him still, her absence a constant ache he couldn't numb. Mr. Westfield? His new assistant, efficient but forgettable, interrupted his thoughts. Your 3 p.m. with the Portland division has been moved to the conference room. They're ready whenever you are. Portland. He had avoided the city since opening the branch office there 6 months ago, sending Harrison instead. The coincidence that Prisha had apparently relocated to the same city was too painful to confront. Mr. Westfield? The assistant prompted again. I heard you, he snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. This assistant wasn't Prisha. No one was Prisha. Tell them I'll be there shortly. The Portland team presented their quarterly results, with appropriate graphs and projections. Dominic listened with half his attention, asking occasional questions while his mind wandered, until a name in the personnel report caught his attention. "Did you say Sharma?" He interrupted sharply. "Say," Portland manager blinked in surprise. "Yes, sir. Prisha Sharma. We recruited her 4 months ago for operations management. She's been exceptional, though currently on medical leave." Dominic's heart hammered against his ribs. "Medical leave? What's wrong with her?" The manager shifted, uncomfortably. "I'm not at liberty to discuss employee medical information, sir. I want her file on my desk in an hour," Dominic ordered, ignoring the concerned glances exchanged around the table. "And her current address." After the meeting, Harrison pulled him aside. "Dom, what's going on? You can't demand an employee's medical records. It's illegal, not to mention completely unlike you." Dominic raked a hand through his hair. "She worked directly for me in New York." "Your former assistant, the one who disappeared." Harrison's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "There was something between you two, wasn't there?" "Her address, Harrison. That's all I need." His friend sighed. "I can get you that much, at least, but tread carefully. Whatever happened between you clearly left wounds." That evening, Dominic stood outside a modest apartment building in a quiet Portland neighborhood, questioning his impulsive decision to fly across the country. What would he even say to her? After months of silence, he had no right to expect anything from Prisha. Before he could knock, an elderly woman emerged from the neighboring apartment. "Are you here for Prisha?" she asked, eyeing him suspiciously. "She's not home." "Do you know when she'll return?" The woman's expression softened with concern. "Poor dear was taken to Portland Medical Center 2 days ago. Collapsed right in the lobby, from what I heard. With her condition, I've been worried sick." Dominic felt as if he'd been struck. "What condition? Is she all right?" "You don't know?" The woman gave him a curious look. "Are you family?" He hesitated. "An old friend." Without waiting for further conversation, Dominic hurried back to his waiting car and directed the driver to the hospital. His mind raced with terrible possibilities. Was she seriously ill? Had she been hiding some condition during their time together? Portland Medical Center was a sprawling complex. At the information desk, Dominic was directed to the maternity ward, a detail that initially confused him until he stepped off the elevator and the realization hit him with stunning clarity. Through the window of room 437, he saw her. Prisha lay in a hospital bed, her eyes closed, monitoring equipment surrounding her. But what stole his breath was the pronounced swell of her belly beneath the hospital blanket. Prisha was pregnant. Very pregnant. A doctor emerged from the room, startling at the sight of Dominic standing frozen in the hallway. "Are you family?" she asked. "I'm the father," Dominic said, the words escaping before he could consider their implications. The timing left little doubt. This was his child. The doctor's professional demeanor softened slightly. "I'm Dr. Winters. Ms. Sharma has been dealing with preeclampsia, a serious blood pressure condition during pregnancy. The episode 2 days ago was concerning enough that we've admitted her for continuous monitoring. Are they in danger?" Dominic could barely form the question. "We're taking every precaution. The baby appears healthy, though smaller than we'd like at this stage. Ms. Sharma needs absolute rest and minimal stress." Dr. Winters studied him carefully. "She hasn't mentioned a father being involved." The implication was clear. "Don't make things worse. May I see her?" "She's resting now. Perhaps you could come back tomorrow during visiting hours." "I'll wait," Dominic said, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. Hours passed as Dominic sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, watching the steady rise and fall of Prisha's chest. Nurses came and went, giving him curious glances but not asking him to leave. As midnight approached, her eyelids finally fluttered open. For a moment, she stared at him in confusion, as if he were a dream her mind had conjured. "Dominic?" she whispered hoarsely. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking on the question. Prisha's hand moved protectively to her stomach. "How did you find me?" "You're working for my Portland division." He moved closer to her bedside. "Though apparently that's not the only significant detail you've kept from me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was going to tell you. Finally decided to, just before this happened." 7 months, Prisha. You've known for 7 months that I'm going to be a father, and you said nothing. "You had your merger," she said quietly. "Your engagement to Valentina Novak. Your perfect corporate life. What place would there be for an unexpected child?" Dominic stared at her in bewilderment. "Engagement? What are you talking about?" "It was all over the financial news. The merger, the speculation about your relationship." "There is no relationship," he said firmly. "The merger was strictly business. Valentina is engaged to her longtime girlfriend, who happens to be our new chief marketing officer." Prisha's eyes widened. "But the news reports—" "We're speculating wildly, as they always do." Dominic took her hand gently. "I haven't been involved with anyone since you left. How could I, when the only person I wanted had disappeared?" A machine beeped loudly as Prisha's heart rate increased. A nurse appeared quickly in the doorway. "Everything all right in here?" she asked, eyeing Dominic suspiciously. "We're fine," Prisha assured her. "Just surprised." When they were alone again, Dominic carefully sat on the edge of her bed. "You left without giving me a chance, Prisha. One night, and then you were gone. I was scared," she admitted. "You've built this empire, this perfect life. I'm just the woman I've been in love with since the moment you reorganized my entire calendar system and told me I needed to sleep more," he finished. Prisha laughed softly through her tears. "That's a strange moment to fall in love with someone. I'm a strange man." His gaze dropped to her belly. "Is the baby okay? The doctor mentioned complications." Prisha nodded. "She's small but fighting, like her father." "She?" Dominic's voice caught. "A daughter. I found out last month." Prisha hesitated, then took his hand and placed it on her stomach. After a moment, he felt a definite kick against his palm. The sensation broke something open inside him. A tenderness he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. "She's strong. Stubborn, too, I think. Also like her father." They sat in silence for a moment, the beeping monitors the only sound in the room. So many months lost, so many misunderstandings between them. "I wanted to tell you," Prisha finally said, "every day, but I convinced myself you were better off without us complicating your life. That this merger was your dream." Dominic shook his head slowly. "My dream changed the day you walked into my office. I just didn't realize it until you were gone." "And now?" she asked, vulnerability clear in her voice. "Now," he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I'm not letting either of you go again, whatever it takes, however long it takes to earn your trust. We're a family, Prisha. If you'll have me." The baby kicked again, as if in agreement, bringing a smile to both their faces. Outside the hospital window, dawn was breaking over Portland, the first light of a new day, and perhaps a new beginning for all three of them. Rewritten Futures. 3 weeks after their hospital reunion, Prisha sat in a plush armchair by the window of Dominic's Portland penthouse, watching rain pattern the glass. Her doctor had finally allowed her to leave the hospital under strict conditions. Constant monitoring, limited activity, and absolutely no stress. Dominic had immediately insisted she stay with him, transforming his sleek, minimalist apartment into a comfortable space for her recovery. "The nursery furniture will be delivered tomorrow," Dominic announced, entering with a cup of her favorite herbal tea. I had Harrison coordinate with the designers. Everything is non-toxic and sustainable as you wanted. Prisha accepted the tea with a small smile. You don't think this is all happening too fast? Since their reunion, Dominic had thrown himself into preparations for the baby with the same intensity he usually reserved for corporate takeovers. He had relocated his entire operation to Portland indefinitely, shocking his New York board members. His assistant now scheduled doctor's appointments alongside business meetings, and baby name books sat beside quarterly reports on his desk. We have less than 6 weeks until our daughter arrives, he replied, sitting across from her. That's hardly fast. That's not what I meant. Prisha set her tea down carefully. 3 weeks ago, we were separated by a continent and months of silence. Now we're living together, preparing for a baby, and you're rearranging your entire life. Don't you need time to adjust? Dominic studied her face, noting the worry lines that hadn't been there during their time in New York. Are you having doubts about us? Not doubts. Concerns. She rested a hand on her swollen belly. Your world is boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. I've watched you take 3 video calls just this morning. How long before you resent having to slow down for us? The question hung between them, voicing the fear that had driven her away in the first place. Dominic moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Do you know what I was doing the day you collapsed? He asked quietly. Sitting in yet another meaningless meeting, thinking about you. For months, I've been going through the motions, building an empire that felt hollow without you in it. Your work has always been your life. My work was my escape, he corrected. From connection, from vulnerability, from the possibility of losing someone I cared about. Then you came along and made me want more than just success. He placed a hand gently on her stomach, feeling their daughter's movements. This isn't an obligation I'm fulfilling, Prisha. This is the life I choose. With you, with our daughter. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm scared, Dominic. Not just of the delivery, but of everything after. Being a mother, building a relationship while caring for a newborn. I'm terrified, too, he admitted, surprising her with his candor. I never had a father. Mine left before I was born. I have no blueprint for this. You never told me that, she said softly. It's not something I discuss. But I promise you this. Our daughter will never doubt that she is loved and wanted by both her parents. The baby kicked forcefully against his palm, making them both laugh through their tears. She's definitely your daughter, Prisha said, always making her presence known at important moments. 2 days later, Dominic sat across from Harrison in his home office, reviewing the quarterly projections while Prisha napped in the bedroom. The board is getting restless about your extended stay in Portland, Harrison reported. Valentina is handling the New York operations well, but they're questioning your commitment. My commitment? Dominic's voice hardened. I've given 15 years of my life to building Westfield innovations. And now your priorities are shifting. They can sense it. Harrison glanced toward the bedroom door. Not that I blame you. But the Novak merger gave us control of the Asian markets you've been targeting for years. This is the moment you've been working toward. Dominic stared at the documents before him. Expansion plans, acquisition targets, growth projections. The empire he had sacrificed everything to build was at its apex. The Tokyo office needs a decision by Friday, Harrison continued. Either you fly out for the final negotiations, or we risk losing the Matsuda contract. The choice crystallized before him, his old life or his new one, the empire or the family. I won't be going to Tokyo, Dominic said finally. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. This is the Matsuda contract, Dom, the cornerstone of our Asian strategy. Then send Valentina, or go yourself. You're more than capable. The board will see this as you stepping back. Perhaps it's time I did. Dominic closed the folder decisively. I've spent my life chasing success at the expense of everything else. I won't make that mistake with my family. Harrison studied his friend's face, seeing a resolution there he'd never witnessed before, not even during their most challenging business battles. You really love her, don't you? More than I thought possible, Dominic admitted. Her and our daughter. Then I'll handle Tokyo, Harrison said, standing to leave. But Dom, the board will expect a more permanent solution eventually. They're already whispering about replacement. After Harrison left, Dominic stood at the window overlooking Portland, contemplating his future. For the first time in his adult life, his path forward wasn't meticulously planned. The uncertainty should have terrified him, but instead, he felt strangely liberated. A soft sound from the doorway made him turn. Prisha stood there, one hand supporting her back, the other cradling her belly. "You're giving up Tokyo for us?" she asked quietly. "I heard your conversation with Harrison." Dominic crossed to her, guiding her to sit on the office sofa. "I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what matters more. Your company has been your life's work, and it still matters to me," he acknowledged. "But not more than you and our daughter. The company can survive without me for a few months. And if months become years," she pressed, "if being a father changes what you want from life, then I'll adapt. We both will." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We've spent too much time apart based on assumptions about what the other person wanted or needed. No more guessing, Prisha. Whatever comes, we face it together." She nodded slowly, leaning into his touch. Together. 1 week later, during a seemingly routine doctor's appointment, Prisha's blood pressure spiked dangerously. Within hours, she was undergoing an emergency C-section, Dominic by her side, his face ashen with worry as doctors worked urgently to deliver their baby safely. "She's so small," Dominic whispered later that night, standing beside the incubator in the NICU, where their daughter, 5 weeks premature, fought for every breath. Nandini Westfield weighed just over 4 pounds with a dusting of dark hair and tiny fingers that curled reflexively around her father's much larger one when he reached through the incubator's port. "The doctor says she's strong," Prisha said from her wheelchair beside him, still recovering from surgery. "A fighter, like her mother," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. For 3 days, they barely left the hospital, taking turns sitting beside the incubator, talking and singing softly to their daughter. On the 4th morning, the neonatologist delivered the news they'd been desperately hoping for. Nandini was stable enough to be held. With nervous care, a nurse placed the tiny bundle in Prisha's arms. Dominic watched, transfixed, as his daughter's eyes, dark like her mother's, seemed to focus on Prisha's face. "Hello, little one," Prisha whispered. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." "She's perfect," Dominic said, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. His finger traced the delicate curve of Nandini's cheek. Absolutely perfect. The baby's tiny hand escaped her swaddling, reaching up to grasp her father's finger with surprising strength. In that moment, everything shifted for Dominic. His past, his priorities, his perception of success. Nothing in his life of achievement had prepared him for the overwhelming love he felt for this small, fragile being and the woman who had brought her into the world. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Prisha looked up, startled. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, more certain than he'd ever been of anything. "Not because of Nandini, though she's reason enough, but because I love you, Prisha Sharma. Because my life began the day you walked into it, and I don't want to spend another day wondering if you know how completely you've changed me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Dominic, I'm sitting in a hospital gown, unwashed for days, holding our premature baby. And you've never been more beautiful to me," he finished. "Say yes, or say you need time. But know that I'll ask again tomorrow and the day after for as long as it takes." Prisha looked down at their daughter, then back at Dominic. Yes, she said simply. Yes to tomorrow and all the days after. 1 year later. The garden of their Portland home bloomed with late summer flowers as guests gathered to witness Dominic and Prisha exchange vows. Nandini, now a healthy, curious 1-year-old, sat on her grandmother's lap in the front row, babbling happily in her miniature lehenga that matched her mother's bridal attire. Prisha's mother had arrived from India 3 months earlier, initially wary of the man who had fathered her grandchild, but gradually won over by Dominic's evident devotion to both Prisha and Nandini. You look nervous, Harrison teased as he straightened Dominic's tie before the ceremony. The man who negotiated the Matsuda contract without breaking a sweat is trembling over a few wedding vows. The stakes were lower with Matsuda, Dominic replied, only half joking. In the year since Nandini's birth, much had changed. Dominic had restructured Westfield Innovations, appointing Valentina as CEO while he transitioned to chairman of the board, a position that allowed him to guide the company's vision while maintaining a presence in his daughter's daily life. The board had initially resisted, but the continued success under the new arrangement had silenced most critics. Prisha had returned to work part-time, heading a new division focused on sustainable technology initiatives, a passion project Dominic had encouraged her to develop. Their home life had found a rhythm that accommodated both their careers and their family, with compromises on both sides. As the ceremony began and Prisha walked toward him, radiant in her red and gold wedding attire, Dominic felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced in his years of corporate achievements. Their journey, from cold professional distance to the warmth of family, had rewritten everything he thought he knew about success and fulfillment. When they exchanged their vows beneath an arch of marigolds and roses, Nandini squirmed free of her grandmother's hold and toddled unsteadily toward her parents. The guests laughed as Dominic scooped her up with one arm, completing their family circle as he sealed his promise to Prisha with a kiss. Later, as evening fell and lanterns illuminated the garden, Dominic found a quiet moment with his wife and daughter away from the celebration. Having regrets about giving up the CEO position? Prisha asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Dominic watched as Nandini, sleepy but determined, practiced her newfound walking skills between them, tiny hands reaching trustingly for her parents' support. Not a single one, he said truthfully. For years, I built an empire believing it would fulfill me. It took you walking into my life to show me what I was really missing. And what was that? She asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. A home, he said simply, gathering both his girls into his arms. Not just a place, but people who love me for who I am, not what I've built. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, countless possibilities stretching into infinity, much like the future they now faced together. No empire of steel and glass could compare to this, Dominic thought. This family they had created, this love they had fought for, this future they would write together, one day at a time. In the distance, their wedding guests continued celebrating. But here, in this quiet moment, the three of them had everything they needed. The ruthless CEO and his once innocent secretary had found something neither expected, a love powerful enough to bridge every distance, heal every wound, and rewrite both their futures into something far more precious than either had imagined possible.